Good day, everyone, and welcome to our second positive psychology workshop by Africademics. So for those of you who aren't familiar with Africademics yet, we are a scholarship platform and community for students, graduates, and early career researchers and youth in and from Africa. So we share information about available scholarships and funding opportunities on various platforms like WhatsApp, Telegram, Facebook, and Twitter, and we do so on a daily basis. In addition to this, Africademics also offer personal support to scholarship seekers through the Scholarship Ambassador program and through initiatives such as this workshop series. But for more information about Africademics, please visit africademics.com or find us on social media, of course, but I did put the website link for you at the bottom of this slide. And just to remind you about what positive psychology is before we continue, it is the scientific study of what makes life worth living. So it places importance on working with the positive traits or aspects of a person, and so doing increasing their well-being. Positive psychology can also be seen as complementary to the traditional disorder-focused approach to psychology by focusing on the positive areas of human functioning and providing us with a more balanced understanding of what mental health is. Positive psychology pursues the promotion of mental well-being in many ways and has developed scientifically proven strategies and tools to do so, some of which we will discuss today. So this workshop has two parts. Firstly, we will discuss stress management and then also self-compassion. We will talk about what they are, why they are important for you, and also how you can practice both of them to benefit from it. So here we're going to start with stress, and I believe all of us knows exactly what it is, or at least what it feels like, but let me read the definition for you. So stress is the psychological, physiological, and behavioral response by an individual when they perceive a lack of equilibrium between the demands placed upon them and their ability to meet those demands, which over a period of time leads to ill health when it becomes chronic stress or unmanaged stress. So even though stress has mostly negative connotations, stress can also be our friend. So it acts as like a protective mechanism that warns us of danger. It's a natural reaction that tells us when to run. This response we call the flight and fight response, or the stress response. And this is positive because when our ancestors saw a lion, this response caused them to run from it. So instead of trying to befriend it, and ultimately saving their lives and therefore ours as well. But in modern times, it also has its benefits, like giving you the energy to work through the night to meet a deadline maybe, or to stay sharp throughout a 4-hour exam. But putting our bodies in a state of stress for a prolonged period is harmful, as we'll see now. So here we'll look at some negative symptoms of ill-managed stress or chronic stress that has been present for a prolonged period of time. Although we all might experience stress differently, some of the common symptoms include difficulty sleeping, weight gain or weight loss, difficulty concentrating, sweaty hands or feet, excessive sleeping, stomach pain, irritability, teeth grinding, panic attacks in severe cases, headaches, heartburn, social isolation, fatigue, nausea, and also feeling overwhelmed. So when we are undergoing something stressful, we oftentimes neglect to identify that we are actually stressed or that we are not managing it correctly because we're so focused on what is going on. And that is why it is important to be able to identify these symptoms in ourselves, but also in others, so that we can step in and take charge before we burn out. Now let's have an even closer look at how bad unmanaged stress is for us, and this also answers the question of why you should care about managing your stress. So in the event of chronic stress, dominant hormones are released into our brains, like cortisol or epinephrine, and this is also called adrenaline. And these hormones are intended for short-term emergencies, and in the event that they were to exist for extended periods, they can actually shrink, impair, and kill brain cells. For example, in one study, researchers from Yale University looked at 100 healthy participants who provided information about stressful events in their lives, and they observed that exposure to stress, even very recent stress, led to smaller gray matter in the prefrontal cortex, which is a region of the brain linked to such things such as self-control and emotions. And in another study conducted by researchers from the Rosalind Franklin University of Medicine and Science, they discovered that a single socially stressed event could kill new neurons in the brain's hippocampus. So while stress can shrink the prefrontal cortex, it can increase the size of the amygdala, which can make the brain more receptive to stress. So cortisol is believed to create like a domino effect that hardwires pathways between the hippocampus and the amygdala in a way that might create a vicious cycle by creating a brain that becomes predisposed to be in a constant state of flight or fight. And then another negative symptom or effect of chronic stress is also infertility problems. In fact, stress accounts for 30% of all infertility problems. In women, stress causes spasms in the fallopian tubes as well as the uterus, and in men, it can cause a reduction in sperm count and also cause erectile dysfunction. Further, stress has also been referred to as the silent killer, as it can cause heart disease, high blood pressure, chest pain, and irregular heartbeats, and it's also linked to some of the biggest killers such as suicide and cancer. So there are many studies and obviously many more negative results of chronic stress, but I think by now you can see that unmanaged or chronic stress is very harmful to our bodies. But oftentimes it isn't possible to walk away from stresses in our lives. It is inevitable, but we can change how they affect us. So there are many techniques that you can use to deal with stress we already feel, but let's now focus on how we can deal with stressors. This is also applicable for the next part of the workshop that will be on self-compassion, because practicing self-compassion is one of the best ways we can actively deal with stress. Okay, so I have us here at a resilience exercise that assists in managing stress. But first, let's look at the definition of resilience. So psychologists define resilience as the process of adapting well in the face of adversity, trauma, tragedies, threats, or significant sources of stress, such as family and relationship problems, serious health problems, or workplace and financial stresses. So for this exercise, I would like to request that you take out a piece of paper and a pen, or either open a blank document on your computer to write on. So you can just pause the video and then do that, please. Okay, so hopefully now you have it. And then for this exercise, we'll now be focusing on increasing our resilience. Again, this is our ability to adapt well in the face of adversity or stress by setting up a resilience plan for ourselves. This is also called the 4S resilience plan. So resilient people work through life challenges using many personal resources, which may include social support that keeps you upright, coping strategies that keep you moving, sagacity, which is the wisdom and the insights that we hold on to, like quotes, and also solution-seeking behavior. So this exercise helps you draw on your resilience resources to build a personal resilience plan for yourself, which you can use then to help you in the future to combat any future challenges. And to do so, we have to look at our past sources of resilience. So if you could please take that piece of paper or blank document now, and then think about a situation in the past that you experienced as either negative or stressful. It could be something like not getting the job you interviewed for or receiving horrible feedback from a supervisor. It could really be anything. Okay, now please write this down in a few words at the top of the page. Then when you're done doing that, you can just draw a grid like this, like the one on the screen, and write the headings as it is there. Or if you're on your laptop, just write the headings underneath each other as we go through them. I'll give you a moment to do so. If you need any longer time, just pause the video and take as much time as you need. Okay, so now think about what supportive people in your life do you have that kept you standing when it would have been easier to fall down. For instance, did you call an old friend, or did you ask a teacher for advice? Or perhaps a parent or a grandparent gave you a pep talk. So please write their names in the first block under the heading support. This is the first S of our 4S plan. You can even write their numbers if you'd like. So you can just pause the video, do that, and then I will now be quiet for a bit, and then when we play again, we'll go through strategies. Okay, now you can think about what strategies you use to help yourself cope with any negative thoughts and feelings that showed up in response to this difficulty that you just wrote down. For example, did you pray, or did you write in your journal? Maybe you went for a walk, or you listened to a particular song or your favorite type of music. So literally anything that made you feel better. You can write this down in the next block under the heading strategies, the second S of our 4S resilience plan. Again, you can pause now if you want to take some time writing it down. Okay, next, we're on to thinking about what sagacities help you bounce back from this difficulty. So as mentioned, this is the wisdom and the insight that you hold on to. So it can come from song lyrics, novels, poetry, spiritual writings. It can be quotes from famous people. It can also be like sayings from your grandparents or your parents, or even stuff that you learned from your own experience. So write one or two of them down in the block under the heading sagacity, and this will then be our third S. So you can just pause now and do that before we move on. Okay, lastly, I would like you to think about what solution-seeking behavior did you display during this difficult time that helped you actively deal with this problem. So for example, did you problem solve? Or did you seek out new information? Did you plan ahead? Or maybe you spoke up and you voiced your opinion. Maybe you even asked somebody else for help. So this you can just then write down in the last block under the heading solution seeking. And this will be our final S of the 4S resilience plan. You can pause now and do that. And then we'll go to the next slide where I use a hypothetical example. Okay, so here I use the hypothetical example of performing horribly in a job interview and then you did not get the job. So firstly, for support, I put down that person will call their partner Nick, or maybe their mom, or booked an appointment with their therapist. Under strategies, they might have gone for a walk, played with their dog, did some gardening, or even wrote in their journal to make them feel better. Under sagacity, you might take a second to remember that growth comes from effort and not results, or put a sticky note on the fridge that says, "This too shall pass." And then also they might think about what they could have done differently in the interview and then write it down to do it differently next time. And then the solution-seeking behavior they showed was asked for feedback from the job interviewers. They also applied for 3 new jobs, or they looked for professional coaching for job interviewing online. So now that you have identified your past resilience resources, I want to encourage you to, after the workshop or whenever you feel it is needed, take a current difficulty you are facing and break down the resources you could use to approach it. So it may repeat those used in the past that you just wrote down now, but you can also change them a bit to make it more relevant to the current situation you're referring to. For instance, going to a manager rather than a parent for support if it's a work-related problem. But then in the next step, the most important step is to use this resilience plan and put it into action. So to do this, consider the order in which to use your different supports, strategies, sagacities, and solution-seeking behaviors that we just wrote down. So look at which resources is most feasible to start with. Often the most feasible resource is the smallest step that you can take, such as calling your partner. Then on your resilience plan, place the number 1 next to the first resource you will use and continue to number your different resources in the order in which you would feasibly use them. And then go ahead and put into action your first resource and continue to work through your entire resilience plan in order that you just numbered them until you have overcome this difficulty. You might find that you only need to use the first, the second, or maybe even just to the third resource, and then you'll already be better. So usually in the live workshop, I will give an opportunity now for questions and answers. But if you're watching the video, you can maybe just pause here if you feel inspired and think about the problem you are facing now. And maybe you can already take this second to figure out your resource resilience plan. Okay, that then brings us to the second part of this video, which is self-compassion. There's a small exercise I would like to do with you just to help you understand what it is before I go into the definition and explaining of it. So I would like you to take out the piece of paper again, or open another blank document on your computer. That will be lovely. And then we can quickly do this exercise. So just pause and do that if it is necessary. Okay. So firstly, what I want you to do is think about a time that a close friend felt really bad about him or herself, or they really struggled in some way. And how did you respond to your friend in this situation? So you can please write down what you'll typically do, what you'll say to them, And also especially note the tone in which you typically talk to your friends in this time. So you just can pause and do that. Okay, then the second thing is, I want you now to think about times when you felt bad about yourself or when you were struggling. And how did you typically respond towards yourself in these situations? So you can also please write this down. Write down what you'll typically do, what you'll say, and also note the tone in which you would talk to yourself. So just pause and do that, please. Okay, so if you've done both of the situations, I want you to look at it and see, do you notice a difference? Because I did the first time I did this exercise, and honestly, it was shocking to see the difference, how I was with my friends and how I am to myself, because honestly, I didn't think I'm someone who beat myself up about anything, but I think we all need a bit of self-compassion. So self-compassion is basically this, showing yourself the kind of compassion that you'll show towards a close friend. We'll now look at like a more formal definition, but now that you have a better understanding, hopefully the definition will be more clear to you. So self-compassion involves being touched by and open to one's own suffering, not avoiding or disconnecting from it, generating the desire to alleviate one's suffering and to heal oneself with kindness. Self-compassion also involves offering non-judgmental understanding to one's pain, inadequacies, and failures, so that one's experience is seen as a part of a larger human experience. Or shortly, we can just say that self-compassion is an emotionally positive self-attitude that should protect against the negative consequences of self-judgment, isolation, and rumination, such as depression. Okay, to go into it a bit deeper, there are 3 elements to self-compassion. So this is self-kindness, common humanity, and mindfulness. But I will now explain each of them by giving and explaining the opposite of each element as well. So firstly, we have self-kindness versus self-judgment. Self-compassion entails being warm and understanding towards ourselves when we suffer, fail, or feel inadequate, rather than ignoring our pain or flagellating ourselves with self-criticism. So self-compassionate people recognizes that being imperfect, failing, and experiencing life difficulties is inevitable. So here they tend to be more gentle with themselves when they're confronted with painful experiences, rather than getting angry when life falls short of their own set ideals. People cannot always be or get exactly what they want. And when this reality is denied or fought against, this is when suffering increases in the form of stress and also frustration and self-criticism. So when this reality is accepted with sympathy and kindness, then greater emotional calmness is experienced. So secondly, we have common humanity versus isolation. So the frustration at not having things exactly as we want is often accompanied by an irrational but pervasive sense of isolation. So as if I were the only person suffering or making mistakes. But the truth is that all humans suffer. The very definition of being human means that one is mortal, vulnerable, and imperfect. So therefore, self-compassion involves recognizing that suffering and personal inadequacies is a part of the shared human experience. It is something that we all go through rather than being something that happens to the me alone. Then the third element, also the last one, we have mindfulness versus over-identification. So self-compassion also requires taking a balanced approach to our negative emotions so that these feelings are neither suppressed nor exaggerated. This balanced stance stems from the process of relating personal experiences to those of others who are also suffering, thus putting our own situation into the larger perspective. It also stems from the willingness to observe our negative thoughts and emotions with openness and clarity so that they are held in like mindful awareness. And mindfulness is a non-judgmental, receptive mindset in which one observes thoughts and feelings as they are without trying to suppress or deny them or even rationalize them. So we cannot ignore our pain and feel compassion for it at the same time. At the same time, mindfulness also requires that we do not over-identify with our thoughts and feelings so that we aren't caught up and swept away by any negative reactivity. So now that we clearly understand what self-compassion is, we can now talk about why it is good to practice and how to apply it to our lives. So research has found that self-compassion is linked to like improved well-being, increase in optimism, more positive affect, which is good mood, also a greater sense of wisdom, more motivation and willingness to take initiative, an increase in curiosity, learning, and exploration, also higher agreeableness and conscientiousness, greater extroversion. It also buffers against stress, especially chronic academic stress, and also it decreases overeating as well as the feeling of guilt, overeating guilt. So obviously there are many benefits to practicing self-compassion, and we can all understand how this will be beneficial in our lives. It doesn't matter in which situation we are or what challenges we are facing. But it's also good to practice it to get better at it. So again, there are many, but I chose this one because to me it makes a clear link between taking a self-compassionate approach to life and also managing stress, the first half of the workshop. So the exercises are also quite similar because they are both quite proactive. So self-compassion can be considered to have two parts, and this duality is represented by yin and yang. So as we know, the three core components of self-compassion are self-kindness, common humanity, and mindfulness of suffering. There are lots of ways to be compassionate towards yourself during times of need. You can comfort yourself, soothe yourself, and offer yourself validation. You can also protect yourself, provide for yourself, and motivate yourself. So this comforting, soothing, validating side of self-compassion, this is known as yin self-compassion. And this is also where the focus is being placed on ourselves. But in contrast, we have yang self-compassion, and this is the protective, providing, motivating side of self-compassion. This is also the side of self-compassion where the focus is on acting within the world, and it's also known as fierce self-compassion. So take, for example, a person who is experiencing burnout at work. So this person might engage in yin self-compassion by running themselves a hot bath and playing relaxing music at the end of this long day. Or alternatively, or additionally, this person might engage in yang self-compassion by speaking up to their employer about cutting down his or her current workload so that they don't feel as burned out. So to see how we can practice self-compassion in any difficult situation, we're going to ask ourselves 6 questions related to these. So three are related to the yin of self-compassion and the other 3 to the yang of self-compassion. So here are the questions. Under yin self-compassion, for comforting, you can ask yourself, what can I do to take care of my emotional needs? For the soothing part, you can say, what can I do to make myself feel physically calmer? To validate the situation or yourself and your feelings, you can say, what can I say to myself to validate my own feelings? And then under the yang of self-compassion, the motivating question will be, how can I motivate myself with kindness, support, and understanding rather with criticism, as we all usually do? Providing question could be, what can I do to give myself what I need? And the protecting question is, what can I do to stop others that are hurting me or stop the harm that I am inflicting on myself? So this way, by answering these questions in difficult situations, we can always make sure to be self-compassionate towards ourselves. And the more we practice it, the easier and more automatic it will become to act in such a manner. But when I don't have the time to really sit down and think about the situation yet and answer all these questions, then I just take a moment to think about what is happening to me. And I think, how would I have reacted towards a friend if they were in this situation? What advice would I give them to make the situation better for them? And then I try and follow that advice. So even though you can never be too self-compassionate or stop practicing self-compassion, you're also probably wondering how self-compassionate you are already. So here's a link to the questionnaire of Kirsten Neff, the founder, or well, the founding mother, not founding father of self-compassion. Then you can, just go fill in the questionnaire there and find out how self-compassionate you are. You can also always email me with questions. I will give my email in the next slide for you at the end of the workshop, but I know one of the questions that oftentimes comes up is, what is the difference between self-esteem and self-compassion? If you've filled in the questionnaire of Kirsten Neff, you can also play around on her website. There's a lot of information on that. I think there's also like a TED talk. But I also put up this mini table for you. You can just pause and have a look at that if this is a question you are wondering about. Otherwise, this is then the end of our video workshop. And I would like to thank all of you for joining us. Then here is my email. If you have any questions related to the concepts discussed in this workshop, please feel free to email me. I will answer those questions as soon as I can. Also make sure to watch the first video workshop that was on the growth mindset and on character strengths. It's also very interesting.